This is the USA Emergency Broadcast Network, your source for reliable disaster preparedness information.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of this station, its management, sponsors, or other hosts. If you have any comments or suggestions about this program, please contact us at radio@usaebn.org. That's radio@usaebn.org.
Welcome to a new Zeta Report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We are live first Mondays of every month. Zeta Report is a partnership with ZetaTalk.com as well as USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. My name is Andre. I'm with USA EBN, and I'm proud and happy to welcome back to the show Nancy Leader of Zeta Talk. Nancy, are you there?
Yes, and I'm proud and happy to be talking with you, Andre. We always make a good team. You always bring a lot to the subject. Tonight I want to cover a few things that relate to the recent hurricanes and earthquakes, etc. One is a storm clash caused by the daily earth wobble. And people are saying, well, why are we having so many hurricanes that are hitting the United States? They used to turn up and go up the Atlantic, and now boom, boom, boom. Harvey, Irma, and et cetera, right, one right after the other. I also want to give, because things have heated up, where the pace has picked up, Andre and I want to go through our self-sufficiency advisory. You know, just touch base, click, 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 what it means to be self-sufficient and how easy it is for you to be there. If we have time, I want to touch base on the Mexican 8.4 quake that happened this last September and how it shook the North American plain all the way to Kamchatka. This is not an 8.4 because the scope was 7,000 miles. The vastness and magnitude is not just the force of the jolt, but also how far it reaches. And should we even have a minute at the end, something very interesting that has arisen about why there doesn't seem to be a lot of water in the Mississippi right off Memphis right now.
Right.
That's a temporary situation, and how water is backing up all the way to St. Louis and further to Hamilton, and what this means. Because what happened during the last big New Madrid rip, the Mississippi ran backwards. So plunging right into those subjects, because it's a full agenda, I wanted to mention quickly the disclaimer, our standard disclaimer. In partnership with USA EBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that the prophecy is not fact. It is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate, but have been wrong on occasion. Bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit ZetaTalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube. Questions from the chat and issues raised in the chat will be addressed toward the end of the hour after the main feature has been presented. Every year, NOAA names about 10 to 12 hurricanes, with 3 to 4 being considered major hurricanes. So far, this is true of 2017. So what makes 2017 different? It has been over a dozen years since a Category 4 hurricane made landfall, Charlie in 2004, and the last Category 3 making landfall was Wilma in 2005. Quoting CNN, before this hurricane season, the United States had gone a record 12 years without a major hurricane landfall. But with Harvey and Irma, it has now experienced 2 Category 4 landfalls in 16 days. Quoting the PBS system, Public Broadcasting System, the U.S. has never been hit since we started collecting records in 1851 by 2 Category 4 or stronger hurricanes in the same season. Quoting weather.com, for the first time in 166 years of weather records, 2 Atlantic hurricane Category 4 hurricanes have made landfall in the United States during the same year. Now, most hurricanes historically run up the Atlantic. They turn and they don't make landfall, and they run up the East Coast. One can compare a diagram from 1951 and 2016, and they look pretty much the same. The establishment can only blame the weather for 2017, blaming air pressure from the north and the east. But the figure 8 wobble of the daily Earth wobble, long predicted by the Zetas and before 2004, and showing up, by azimuth and altitude checks of where the sunrise and sunsets were by a team around the world. Figure 8, this is Zeta talk that was a prediction that came true. And it leans the globe to the left, pulling Europe into the Atlantic, and then the wobble has a bounce back of the North Atlantic, bringing Quebec and New England south. Well, there's your press from the north and the east. At no time in history have hurricanes backed up and then proceeded on as Harvey did. Never. You can't find a cone that looks like that. What has changed is the ferocity of the Earth wobble. The wobble pushes the land this way and that under the blanket of air and water. Thus, Harvey backed up for hundreds of miles. I mean, it went all the way into central Texas and then stopped and reversed right back into the Gulf. A hurricane's cone of uncertainty is normally a smooth curve, not a zigzag. None are of record except for what Harvey did, which was due to the Earth wobble becoming much stronger, more violent, and ranging over a larger span of the globe during each swing of the figure 8. Irma's track was uncertain until she blasted through the Florida Keys to run up the west coast of Florida, but instead of heading north and inland, Irma veered to Missouri and then turned south to return to the Gulf, right back toward Houston. Per the Zetas, this is storm clash caused by the daily Earth wobble, something they predicted in 2005, the storm clash, that is, and I'll read you their prediction in 2005. The storm surge anticipated during major storms is predictable, coming from one direction, as is the wind. But what would be the effect of surges and wind coming from different directions simultaneously during such storms? Now, this is in the opinion of the Zetas, but in that it is happening, it is a little more than opinion. It is what we like to call Zeta's right again. There it is. They said, and yes, because the wobble is bringing Quebec south and Europe, swinging such that it's compressing the water and the air in the Atlantic, forcing the hurricanes onto make landfall in the USA. Coriolis Effect. I don't know is this a new term for you guys? What it means is that coming off as the globe turns toward the east, the atmosphere curls off and swings around in a clockwise motion going in the northern hemisphere, counterclockwise in the southern, and curls around in a big circle, which is what creates the prevailing westerlies here in the northern hemisphere, the trade winds, etc., etc. Well, this also adds to storm clash in the Atlantic during hurricane season. Slamming into land on the North American continent, they reference the Coriolis effect and how it adds. Wind and water curl off the equator in a clockwise motion, putting it into a direct clash with the Earth wobble, which is bringing the wind and water south and slamming it in from the east. So, boom, boom. Quoting Zeta Talk in 2017, the wobble, in short, is churning the North Atlantic in a circular motion, where this fits with the Coriolis effect, where the wind and water curl up from the equator in a circular motion, moving clockwise in the northern hemisphere. The lean to the left does a direct clash, pushing the storm back in a path toward the U.S. coastline. Now, this is the opinion of the Zetas. that this is what was causing all the hurricanes to unlike the whole last 12 years, what's causing all these landfalls. That's what the Zetas say, and let me tell you, they're never wrong. I mean, all right, unless they make a deliberate white lie, and they're never wrong. Okay. And they have made a deliberate white lie. In 2003 they did. They said it would enter, Nibiru would enter the solar system, and then it would pass the Earth. Well, it entered the solar system, and right on time, and right according to what they said, but it still hasn't passed. So there you go, 50%. All right. During the 2017 hurricane season, and despite the Department of Defense being mustered well ahead of time for rescue efforts, FEMA has been warning the public to be self-sufficient. I was shocked to see that in print. Self-sufficient. And in other words, don't just sit there and wait to be rescued. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and help your neighbor. And to not expect instant results or rebuilding. We at Zeta Talk and at USAEBN have always stressed this. My approach is to ask the listener to assume they will be naked and afraid, having virtually nothing but trash tossed around by high winds and waves and rubble after an earthquake. We have addressed all this before, but let's recap. Houseboat living. Houseboat living is an obvious solution in flooded areas. One can build a houseboat from trash, and pontoons can be constructed of anything airtight. For instance, from empty plastic bottles tied under the houseboat or inflated inner tubes. Plastic tubs with the tops open will also work. In other words, you line them up, put boards on either side so that water doesn't splash into, the plastic tub. And by displacement of water, this is how it works, and the houseboat will float. Be resourceful. Use what you have at hand. Tents and tarps. One does not need to have a tent, complete with poles and stakes, to make a tent. A tent or a lean-to can be made from a tarp strung over a rope. If one does not have a tarp, make a lean-to from debris and cover it with whatever is at hand. Camping equipment is inexpensive and usually can be carried easily for hiking trips. So stock up on some of this stuff. You can make a tent or a tarp, out of a sheet, so that the rain collects and pours off it and doesn't fall on your head. It's not as good as a waterproof tarp, and plastic bags. Whatever happened to garbage bags? You can use those. They can be cut and opened up, or even boards, or a piece of tin that got blown off your roof, etc. You can make a lean-to, and it's great for not only keeping the rain off your head, but gathering heat. Have a little fire in front of you, and it's captured, and you're warmer than you would be just sitting out in the open. Little houses, tiny houses. Another survival concept is the tiny house. We are used to sprawling homes. How many square foot have you got? 12,000 square. What? You're going to have a square dance in every room? But people brag on how much square footage they have. Our wealth is measured by floor space. The tiny house makes the statement that what we need is very little, and we can squeeze in a table, a bed, and a bathroom. And some of this can be folded up and put away, like the bed can fold up against the wall, etc. And it's very popular. You see these ads or these articles about, look at this little thing that you can drag behind your car, and it'll sleep 12. Well, I'm exaggerating, of course not. But basically, it's making the statement that you don't need a big house. You need to keep the rain off your head. You need to be able to have a little privacy to wash up, etc. Sleep soundly and not have a raccoon sitting on your head chittering at you. But there's all this business with 20,000 feet of floor space. You don't need that. Homes can be made out of trash, old tires filled with dirt, or burned into a hillside for insulation. Cozy and compact, the tiny house is the house of the future. Now, what about drinking water? And you hear about this all the time about, I didn't hear that with Houston, but, down in Puerto Rico, we have nothing to drink. We have no water. Well, we just hammer on this. You can harvest the fog. You can, filter and boil water and etc. And what you've got coming out, the steam, it's pure. There's no heavy metals. There's no, did these people never think that a day would come when they couldn't have bottled water? Distilling your drinking water gets rid of not only germs and parasites, but also heavy metals and pollutants. Germs and parasites are killed by the heat of boiling. Heavy metals remain in the base water being boiled and do not carry forward into the steam. And pollutants such as petrol, spilled gasoline, boil away and are evaporated. That you can, distilling your water is the ultimate cleaning technique. Better than dropping a little bit of bleach in, better than filters, which you'll run out of filters. But as long as you can boil water and figure out how to have it strike something cold and condense and drip off the edge, you got good drinking water. Also, you get rid of those heavy metals so that you don't have lead poisoning. But lead, if you have volcanoes going off, you can have volcanic ash. You can have your drinking water polluted with lead if you have like a lot of earthquakes and the pipes break, etc. And now and magma coming up from underneath, it can put lead up there to where you're drinking. Even well water might not be lead free, at least temporarily until it settles back down and the rain pushes it back down. So distill your drinking water. But if you find yourself with lead poisoning, which is a disaster because it's basically killing brain cells, particularly for young children, you can chelate. Lead poisoning can result from volcanic dust leaching into the ground or fractured rock allowing heavy magma to sneak up and mingle with the groundwater. Thus, well water, river and lake water, and surface water such as ponds should be suspect. Distill, then drink or cook. Lead can be removed from the body by chelation or a diet high in vitamin C, iron, and calcium. But the best approach is to drink clean water from the start. But be aware that a good diet can strip lead from the body. Right, Andre? You're kind of an expert on that, right?
Well, part of the thing with chelation too is like you should be doing this normally if you've got a diet that's high in fresh vegetables. Vegetables you grow is what we've talked about. We're going to get into in the next snippet here, but a lot of the things that people stock up on from a quote-unquote preparedness / prepper aspect is more about defense and not so much about offense. And you know what I mean? They're always looking at how much ammunition do I need, how many machetes do I need, how am I going to fortify my bug out, or how am I going to fortify my house so people won't get in. Well, if you don't have water, you're not going to last very long. Filters are fine until the filters are clogged, and then you're done. So like you said, Nancy, and we've stressed here on many shows, and this show is just kind of a recap of our survival tips that we have throughout our episodes. Distilling is the best way to go. Distillation of water, making it into steam, having that steam condense, and then you've got clean water on the other side. But if you do get in a situation, cilantro, any of the really dark leafy green vegetables, and they all start with C too, don't they, Nancy? It's like cilantro,
yes,
curcumin,
so.
And what's the other one?
Yes, vitamin C and calcium. They start with C too.
Yep.
Yeah.
But again,
yes, indeed.
your body, your kidneys and your liver are going to try to pull those toxins from your body naturally. So it's best to start with clean water. And if you do find yourself where you've been contaminated by drinking bad water, push more clean water. Rinse it out is the best way to go if you don't have anything else. Using these other methods helps, but you should always start with clean water. And if you're looking at any of the coverage from either Puerto Rico or Florida or whatever hurricane got hit, whatever area that was, you kind of see the people going up to waiting in line for gasoline, waiting in line for water, waiting in line for everything. When they get to the front of the line, how much water do they give them, Nancy? What, 14, 15 gallons? No.
Yeah, I'm not
like
really sure. They're parsing it out. Yeah.
6.5 liters, like not even 2 liters, 3 liters of water.
And then they want to use that water to take a shower or wash up or
take a shower. Right.
Yeah, people don't think in terms of self-sufficiency. They think in terms of moaning and waving and come rescue me, and
right.
no wonder and we've taken a different approach. At Katrina, took a long time for anybody to go and rescue them, and nobody said self-sufficiency, but now I'm amazed. The DOD is out there promptly, and I'm hearing think self-sufficiency. So we've got the shoe on the right foot anyway. So urban gardening is the next thing that we want to breeze through. Gardens are springing up everywhere, in containers, on porches, and in vacant lots in cities. Don't just stock up and hoard. Learn to grow food. Learn how to save. Saving seed is very important. You can't plant the seed and say, well, now we're all set, and then not know what to do next year. The idea is to be self-perpetuating. Save seed from your pumpkins and Indian corn used for decorations this fall if you haven't gotten anything. Those two are a good start because you'll need those seeds soon enough. Compost with earthworms to grow nitrogen-rich soil, and those earthworms are edible too. Growing Power, which started in Milwaukee, is absolutely a model to follow. This guy is an award winner because he brought in some dirt and he grows earthworms and gardens, and then he puts the green compost on the pile and he makes more and more soil, and it's like a growing, and then they eat the earthworms too, so he's become a consultant in other cities. The award-winning company acts as a consultant in a number of cities. I know Chicago, not sure Cincinnati. This CEO is doing everything right, saving seed, building soil from compost, and utilizing those empty lots in inner city slums. I kid you not. In choosing what vegetables to grow, remember one does not need to eat meat if you have a lysine-rich combination in your garden. Buckwheat, soy, peas, legumes, and amaranth are highest in lysine. Corn and amaranth together form the equivalent of red meat. I will repeat. Corn and amaranth together form the equivalent of red meat. You don't need to have a cow. Earthworms deserve a special mention as they are not only beneficial by growing soil from green compost, making nitrogen available to the plants, but they are a primo food source. They are 82% protein and have omega-3 as their essential oil, and the herd does not stampede. They're very quiet at night, too. By watering and collecting the drainage from worm beds, one has instant nutrient solution for hydroponic gardening. I can attest to that. Remember to remove the egg casts from the green compost using those egg casts in the garden. They're nitrogen rich. As too many egg casts in the compost signal the worms to stop breeding. It's a natural contraception method. Oh, if we have more babies, we'll all starve. So take the egg casts away so they don't think that there's too many. Red wigglers are the best earthworms to use. Duckweed. This is something that most people, I think, are not familiar with. You see a pond, you see kind of a pale green, light green. It looks like a scum, thin layer. It's a tiny little plant, and is I don't know, just well, it's larger than a pinhead, but and has one little root that hangs down. It's an itsy bitsy little plant, a high protein. But even before man became domesticated and roved as a hunter-gatherer, he lived off what nature provided. There are several weeds that are notable for nutrition. Duckweed, that light green tiny plant that floats on many marshes, is 45% protein, more than soy, which is 36% protein. And I know there are industries that collect the duckweed and dry it and make a powder out of it and sell it as a protein powder. So why don't you do that? Duckweed can also be dried and powdered. It can be fed to pisha fish or other vegetarian-eating fish, or it can be eaten as a salad. Duckweed and ducks love it. That's why it's called duckweed. They're out there gobbling away. It grows rapidly, is found globally, and is reputed to extract nutrients from sewage water, thus cleaning the effluent. Now, I know this sounds gross, but that's the life cycle, What we dump back in the water needs to be cleaned, and plants do a great job at that. Meanwhile, they get the nutrients, and that's the cycle of life. Was it the Lion King, the cycle of life? Okay. Back to vegetables. Seaweed. In many cultures, seaweed and kelp is harvested and included in the regular diet. In Japan, China, and Korea, they eat seaweed. It's a complete protein. If houseboat living, this could be a source of survival if living in the waters off the coast. You fish, now you got your protein. Oh, here's some kelp and seaweed. Great, now we have a vegetable, and there you are. Kudzu. If anyone has lived in the southeast of the United States, are familiar with kudzu. It's considered a weed, and it covers houses, and it covers cars, and it grows over the roadside, and all up the telephone pole, and then they spray it, and they hack at it, and it's just so, it just never wants to die. They have these big tubers, and they have flowers, but guess what? They're 100% edible. It has, it's a pea plant and can fix nitrogen to the soil, thus allowing other plants to have access to this nitrogen. Like soy will do that also. And the farmers here alternate corn and soil. And when they have a soy, well, it fixes nitrogen in the soil, then they put next crop corn, and it sucks up that nitrogen. So it's one of those helpful plants. Cattle can be fed kudzu, and you can use it thus as a fodder. Well, so can people eat the leaves and stuff as a salad, or steam it, fluff it up. The plant is entirely edible. Tubers, leaves, and flowers, and the vines make a mighty strong rope. Preppers often stock up on vitamin pills. I've got my bullets, as Andre likes to say, I'm all set. My machete, my bullets, my meal's ready to eat, and my jar of vitamin pills. Well, what happens when the vitamins are gone, right? Etc. Once again, Mother Nature provides. One of my favorite shows here on USA EBN was when I talked about how you can get all your vitamins from bugs and weeds, and I mean all. There isn't a thing that you'd be missing. I mean, how do you think we evolved? We evolved by eating the stuff out in nature, and obviously it was sufficient or we wouldn't be here. The cavemen did not have vitamin bottles. Vitamin C is a biggie, as without it, one bleeds to death, one gets scurvy. Scurvy is notorious for the people that came from Europe to America in boats, and they would get, and what do they have? Salted pork and this and that. No fresh vegetables, no vitamin C. And pretty soon their teeth are falling out, they're bruising readily, and then they die. They hemorrhage. Many plants that are considered weeds are sky high in vitamin C. And if winter is coming, all one has to do is dry them to store them. Drying foods is one of the best preparation techniques. Take some plants indoors and keep them on the windowsill, and a little sunlight or whatever, a little water, And there you are. Scurvy grass from northern climates like Scotland and Scandinavia is notoriously high in vitamin C. Thus, it gets its name. Get some seed and grow it in your window box. These northern climes are not noted for high sunlight. So scurvy grass is another low-light plant. If you have volcanic gloom, etc., don't fret. Scurvy grass will do fine. Sheep sorrel, which I have in my garden, I had in my yard, I didn't even realize it. It's another low-light plant that would pass for grass almost. It's very low-growing and grows throughout Europe and North America. I purchased seed for my garden and was surprised to find I already had it in my lawn. And so it's indigenous here in Wisconsin, right under my nose, a very low-light plant requiring little sunlight. Dandelion leaves also contain vitamin C. If you're trapped in suburbia, head down to that neighbor who never killed the weeds in his yard. He's the one who's got the weeds and likely plenty of seed waiting to sprout into spring. The dandelion is our friend. An entirely edible plant, by the way, as is cattail and stinging nettle and plantain and most other weeds. Foliate weeds deserve a mention. You ever see the photos of the poor little babies with spinal bifida, where the spine opens up and in the middle of their back they have this bump, and then they have to walk with crutches for the rest of their life. It's just so sad because it's so curable. The mother did not have enough foliate. It's a B vitamin. Anything with a lot of leafy weeds, is foliate. It's found in all leafy greens. Vitamin A is also a crippler, causing blindness. Vitamin A includes beta-carotene, so it's no surprise that carrots are one of the best sources, as are cabbage, cousins, and sweet potato. These foods store well through the winter in a root cellar and should certainly be part of your garden population. And plenty of weeds, have vitamin A, let me tell you. And don't forget the bugs. In addition to being high in protein and oils, they have minerals and especially the B vitamins. Remember, lobster and shrimp are in the bug family. Just think of them as a small lobster or small shrimp and crunch away. They are delicious. Lobster and shrimp are delicious, are they not? I quote from Rumpold and Schulter, who wrote a book in 2013 and compiled nutrient compositions for 236 edible insects, and I quote, "Although significant variation was found in the data, many edible insects provide satisfactory amounts of energy and protein, meet amino acid requirements for humans, are high in monosaturated and or polysaturated fatty acids, and are rich in micronutrients such as copper, iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, selenium, and zinc." In other words, there's nothing. How do you think the caveman managed to, arrive at modern man? They didn't die out. They got their stuff from somebody or something, and bugs are always around. Kick over a log, oh, look at them scurry. They eat dead things, so, I one of my favorite survival techniques, and it's a little gross if you haven't had supper yet, don't listen, but if you have a roadkill, and the flies are swarming all over the place, and you have chickens you want to feed, put that roadkill in a bag and let all the fly eggs, which become grubs, eat that roadkill until the bag is writhing, right? Split it open, and here comes your flock of chickens, and boy, are they going to have a feast. And now you have chickens and eggs. It's the cycle of life, All right. Insects provide your vitamin B needs better than whole grain bread. Quoting from Buckins in 2005, who showed that for a whole range of insects that thiamine, vitamin B1, had up to 4 milligrams per 100 grams of dry matter. Riboflavin, vitamin B2, had 8.9 milligrams per 100. By comparison, whole grain bread provides up to, a tiny percentage of that, 0.19, blah, blah, blah. So the bottom line is bugs beat out grain. Bugs and corn and amaranth beats out cows. And so what we're getting from our domesticated animals is what's easy for corporate farmers or farmers to harvest, package, and transport, and we're told that it's the best food. It ain't. Go out and learn how to live off weeds and bugs. You might have to do that. At least bear that in mind for when your back is against the wall.
Right.
Well, now I'm ready to switch over to the Mexican. Yeah, go ahead, Andre.
I would just want to touch on that a little bit. That when you think about it from a bigger perspective, that what is the cow eating? Where is it getting its protein? It's putting on a lot of mass, putting on a lot of muscle, making a lot of milk. It's just eating green whatever. I mean, goats, same thing. What do goats eat? Everything, but mostly vegetables and weeds and, So when you think about it, these animals are putting on, growing and reproducing and making milk and eggs and all these other things. They're using protein and all the micronutrients from plant matter. Why couldn't we as humans do that same thing? And it's like, people that are, full-blown meat eaters. I work in a restaurant, so I hear a lot, the vegans or the vegetarians versus the meat eaters. It's not really like that when you think about it. It's like, it's all, somebody eats it first and then you eat that animal. Okay. You can just cut to the chase and just eat the plants.
Like, right. Well, I guess in North Korea they have so many people that are starving. I mean, really starving, where they don't bury their dead until they start to get an odor because they don't want anyone digging them up in the cemetery and feasting. So everybody eats grass, and they have these pictures of people, the poor citizens, cutting grass, and they take it home and they try to ferment it or do something with it. Cows, etc., and bison or whatever, they have a series of stomachs, and so it's a digestive tract that allows them to eat it and mull it over, and then they chew the cud, and then they swallow it again, and now a different stomach works on it, and so it is difficult to digest grass. But I see your point. I see your point. Really, that you just cut to the chase and you cut out the middleman, particularly something like cattle. Well, if you have grasslands, keeping goats would be one of the best things, because goats will eat just about. Right. They'll even eat poison ivy, and if you're aware, there's a lot of dead stuff, all over. I'm talking about plant matter. Trees went over, and it's breaking down out there in the forest, and you have chickens, and they're free ranging. They're eating the bugs, and then you get the eggs and the chicken meat. So and right. If you have goats and they're grazing, now you get goat milk. You can also eat goats, but they are so affectionate. I think it'd be hard to kill them. But goat cheese is as good as cow cheese, even better, some people say. So. Yeah, you're right, Andre. If you don't have chickens and goats, you just cut to the chase and eat what they eat. And well, they say
good point though, Nancy.
A lot of
grass.
Yeah.
Grass doesn't work for humans. Yeah, we don't know built for that, but most of the other stuff.
It's hard.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, plants. Why? I guess weeds are sometimes a little more bitter. Like if we eat lettuce and that's domesticated, say, oh well, it's sweet lettuce, and some weeds are kind of bitter, but and that's probably why they're not a commercial plant. It's but highly nutrient rich. Stinging nettle is high in iron, for instance. So. Well, we could go on and on. So I think, folks, get a book, and next time you go and walk out in the woods or through the meadows or whatever, take note of what's in your area and where it is.
Right.
And if you have to, you can go harvest it and come back and eat it raw or steam it or put it into a soup, And I always joke around about if you can't get the kids to eat bugs and worms, chop them up, and don't tell them what it is. My favorite story about eating earthworms is we had a roofer here, and he'd heard the stories about that we had a little Japanese sushi chef here, and he was working on earthworm recipes, right? And I took out a little bowl of soup to him, and I said, "Would you taste this and tell us what you think?" It's chicken soup, And he said, "Well, it's pretty good, but I can't see the chicken. It needs more chicken." Then he blanched and said, "This ain't one of them worm things, is it? Too late. He ate it." But it does taste just like chicken. It's got omega-3 oil. Okay. There was a big earthquake in Mexico in September, on September 8th, and it was off the coastline of Mexico. It was on the North American and Cocos plates, and the Cocos plate is one of those little ones, that it's a smallish plate. It's not the Pacific plate. It's not all that small, but it's not North America, not South America, not the Pacific, but it's sort of in betweeny there, and They called it an 8.1. Oh, maybe it's an 8.4. But I was, the USGS dumbs down the magnitude of so many quakes, and it just takes them off, the database, so where people see it, and they say, "Whoa, we had one there," and they go back a few minutes later and say, "Where is it? It's gone." They remove them, especially if they're out in the ocean. They take them away, and they're trying to. The USGS is this cover-up. They don't want the public to panic over why are we having all these earthquakes? Why are we having all these storms? Why isn't the sun rising and setting in the right place? What's going on? And because they think if they say, well, Nibiru, it's real, and we're going to have a passage, and we'll have a crustal shift like we have every 3,600 years, and blah, 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 and all kinds of people will die, and the coastlines will be flooded, and they say, well, then why should I pay my mortgage? Why should I, and then you have a unruly populace, and you have to declare martial law, and what are the banks going to do? Nobody will want to pay their mortgage. So the idea is to put that off until the last minute, and they keep saying the time is not right. The time is not right. We need to be certain. Let's just tell them at the last minute, and then they can run for the hills or drown, but we'll be safe in our enclaves. So it's just a whole other story. But the bottom line is, meanwhile, for the last 15 years, the USGS has been downgrading magnitude, earthquake magnitude, and removing quakes from the database. So you have to look with suspicion. So right away I go in and say 8.4, huh? One way you tell what magnitude is the jolt and the distance. You take both of those into consideration. And it's pretty well documented, how you compare different earthquakes of magnitude this or magnitude that. How far away was the shaking, that type of thing. Well, the USGS wasn't honest about a number of things, but the point is that right away the Zeta said, oh, that was a magnitude 12. This is in the opinion of the Zeta's magnitude 12. So I took a look, looking for the jolt and the distance, what swayed, how far away was it felt, and all that kind of thing. Well, only a slight tsunami of 2 to 3 feet was generated. It wasn't a tsunami generator like the one over in Indonesia that had this huge, wave that rolled in Aceh. So no tsunami warnings were issued because just nothing happened. Yet buoys went off on alert. And where were those buoys? All along the North American plate. I mean, right off the coastline and snugged along the North American plate, up past British Columbia, up past the Aleutian Islands, and around the North American plate, goes all the way down toward Japan. Kamchatka, for instance, is on the North American plate, right? And a portion of the Russian Far East is too. And then goes right through the Arctic. Okay, so what's causing those buoys to throb all the way, only snugged along the coast, where it's virtually on top of the granite of the North American plate? Well, guess what? Kamchatka is from where this big quake happened. 7,000, a little over 7,026 miles away. When we had, in 1811, the New Madrid quake ran bells in Boston, and that was 1,137 miles away. So the Mexican quake was 7 times more, the vast in its distance. So the Mexican quake was also felt in Austin and caused buildings to sway 650 miles away, but that wasn't noted by the USGS. They ignored that business about buildings swaying. The Mexican quake caused the seismographs worldwide to turn black. It's what 15 years ago the USGS called it, the earth rang like a bell. Everything turned black. And then they adjusted the seismographs so that it would take, I don't know what, an act of God to get all the seismographs to turn black. But this one did, the little 8.4. So the shake maps are also another indication of magnitude. That shows the degree of shaking and distance from the epicenter. And they draw those up. And I went and looked at the historical shake maps, where buildings swayed, that kind of thing. The massive 9.6 quake in Chile in 1960 was offshore, but close to the coast, and the shake map indicates the coast was affected for 1,000 kilometers. The 1906 quake in San Francisco was land-based, was considered a 7.8, and ran up the coast for approximately 450 kilometers, half. The 1906 was half the Chile 1960, which was considered the biggest quake, I think, historically. In 1964, there was a 9.2 quake in Alaska. This was offshore in the Sound and had an impact, again, for 1,000 kilometers, like the 1961 in Chile. The USGS shows the 2017 Mexico quake having only a 350 kilometer, smaller than the 1906 San Francisco, which would fit with what they're claiming it is, an 8.4. Yet buildings swayed in Mexico City, which was 1,000 kilometers away. It wasn't 350 kilometers, it was 1,000, at least in this instance. So, once again, the USGS lied, not to be surprised. And they do, and they'll keep doing it. They'll keep dumbing it down. Something, leveled London, every building, and became dust. Well, it must have been a 3.2. They do that. So bear in mind that you're not getting the truth. So we have just a few minutes left. And Andre and I agreed that we would talk about something that just came up like last couple of days. And it was somebody made a video, and it was called to my attention. And it seemed to be well documented, so I took a look at it and examined. It was a notation, and a lot of people were chattering away, on this particular video that lived in the area, saying that the Mississippi seemed to have lost all its water near Memphis. Now, I'm not talking about bone dry like desert. I'm saying that boats were having trouble navigating, sandbars were, showing up. But the main thing is NOAA, N-O-A-A, which measures water depth and the like, said, off Memphis, where normally should be like maybe 10 feet high, flooding would be closer to 18, 19, 20 feet high. This was considered -5 or something like that. It was minus. It was like 15 feet below what it should have been for normal. And so this is not some conspiracy theorist out there putting together a video. This was NOAA charts saying, here it is, that's where the water is, right? So I decided, actually the Zetas nudged me, they always kind of nudge me where I should go and look, to see what the Mississippi upstream was, because if the water was that low there, well, what was happening up, up further up, because the Mississippi wanders beyond Kentucky and it goes up along Illinois, past St. Louis and and etc. Minneapolis, and so I took a look at these NOAA charts. For St. Louis, it was like 15 feet. Flood stage was more like 19. Well, we're not flooding. And going up further to Hamilton, it was more like 11 feet. So it looks like the water was coming down the Mississippi about right, 11 feet or whatever. And then it got to Memphis, and it couldn't pass, so it was starting to accumulate there down at St. Louis or build up, right? The flowing was moving slower. Remember when we had the New Madrid, there was one of the statements historically made, the Mississippi ran backwards for a time. Backwards. Right. Well, what would cause that? Instead of flowing down toward the Gulf, something caused the land heaved and the water went back up the Mississippi, and then after it was all over, it returned to, merrily down the Mississippi to the Gulf, right? Well, this is not as bad as that, but it's similar process. So, Zeta talk, in the opinion of the Zetas, what's going on is that the North American continent is under a lot of stress with all the Mexican quakes. Mexico and the Aleutian Islands are being pulled closer together like a bow, and the North American plate is under this tremendous tension, which will only be relieved with a diagonal shift in the ground where the east coast of the United States shifts to the northeast, and the rest of the, country and the southwest and the like shifts to the southwest. Diagonal split. Of course, all the bridges in the Mississippi are ripped, and et cetera, and this runs up the Mississippi through Ohio, down under the Great Lakes, and rings bells up there in Boston or whatever, so it's terrible. The New Madrid adjustment is going to be a biggie. This is in the opinion of the Zetas. That's their prediction for the New Madrid adjustment. So, they said what happens when the continent is under this kind of a diagonal tension. You have, and the rock does not like to split at a diagonal. It doesn't want to do that. In running along the Mississippi is where there's a weak point in the crust, which is why it droops, which is why water accumulates there, which is why the river runs there. So when you have a diagonal tug like that and the rock resists, there is a bunching up. It's like, I want to move. No, get out of my way. No, I don't want to, so it bunches up, which causes the heaving, which causes the river to block and maybe run backwards. And then something else gives, like Mexico has another quake or something like that, and the bunching up stops, and we can relax now. And then the river runs normally. So this is a sign. How else can one interpret that? This is a sign that the New Madrid fault line is under tension. You don't have to believe anything the Zetas say, although they're very accurate. But, get ready, guys. The Self-Sufficiency, go through that. Take it seriously. Get a book on, just take a listen to some of our prior broadcasts that Andrea and I have put together. It's in podcast there at USAEBN. It's on the Nancy Leader YouTube channel. You get that off my website. You take, new Zeta Talk. You take the interviews, and it'd be the top of the list. Take the latest, dig down and get all this information. Take it seriously. Get a minimal amount of equipment together, but mainly carry it with you as a knowledge base, a skill set, that will make you and your family and your loved ones self-sufficient. And that's the end of my lecture. Yes.
One thing that you can also do as a preparedness learning step, just think about your location. Where is you and your family residing right now? Where will you be if something happens, like Uncle Bob's cabin or the farm, or if you want to call it a bug out location? What's your safe location going to be if something like a hurricane, Puerto Rico, or a magnitude 8.4, more like a 12, hits your area? Are you going to be in a safe location afterwards? It's fine to have the knowledge that something's going to happen, but then that disaster happens. Now what? So what we're trying to do here with the Zeta Report and USA Emergency Broadcasting Network is trying to get the information out to you now, not to scare you or to instill fear or sell a book or any of that. What we're trying to do is get the information out there so you can have that knowledge and start to work on your situation and what best works for you. Because take Puerto Rico right now for an example. They can't get supplies off the dock there because there's no gas to run the trucks and there's no drivers with all these other excuses. Well, if you're waiting for the government to help you out after a disaster, it's, what are they, Nancy, like 11, 12 days into it down there?
Mm-hmm.
People are dying because they're not prepared. They're not self-sufficient enough. Granted, a hurricane wiped everything off the island, but my point is to know where you're going to be after disaster hits. If that's a safe location, are you in a floodplain? Are you on the coast? Are you near a volcano? These are the things you want to think about. Are you on a fault line? Do you live in San Francisco? What's your plan? You live on the San Andreas Fault. You've known that all of your life that you've lived there. Now what? I mean, these are the things kind of get you jump-started. One thing that really helped me out is the safe locations spreadsheet or PDF that you have on Zeta Talk and also on the Pulse Shift Ning. It's called Safe Locations, and it breaks it down. You can get it in PDF form or you can go through the links. Almost every major city's on there, every major region. You can just click on that and look at it. For example, Wisconsin will fare well after the pole shift because of the land and the natural spring water and that sort of thing. Whereas, Chicago, just south of us, won't do so well because of the proximity to the New Madrid Rip and the fact that they've got a lot of tunnels underneath the city and that there's a lot of people there concentrated. So safe locations is a great tool on the Zeta Talk website. And, the 7 steps to get your safe location is also there too. These are just want to get you as a listener, and if you have any interest in being prepared for major disasters, this doesn't just apply to pole shift. It would apply to a hurricane. It would apply to flooding. All of these happen during pole shift. So if you're preparing for pole shift, you're kind of covering all your bases. So as far as preparedness goes, but it's a constant. You just got to keep working on it. Got to keep thinking about it and like, ooh, I'm going to buy some more canned goods this week. Ooh, I'm going to buy some dried milk because it's on sale. Keep it around for when you need it.
Exactly. Yep. And there's no one solution for everybody. It depends on your health, what your skill sets are. Forming
Right.
groups will happen. Okay, so you're a carpenter. So you're used to using electric tools, but wait a minute. This farm that you arrived at, after hiking through the hills and trying to get away, has hand tools, which, from old-timey days, and voila, now you're making furniture and putting up, so that you have a niche. You can have a niche. Good cooks have an automatic niche. People who are nurses and doctors or dentists have a natural niche also, and people who are farmers who understand farm animals and the like, they have a niche. So gardeners, even though you may only have worked in a greenhouse and only grown pretty flowering plants, you get out there and somebody needs to be collecting seed and tending to the little baby spinach plants or whatever. Those are skill sets that transfer over. So and we've addressed all of this, Andre and I. We've been at this for 2 years, and I can't think of a subject that we should have covered that we haven't hammered to death. Go through and systematically listen to pretty much all of our broadcasts, and you'll be miles ahead.
in that YouTube feed as well, there'll be a Zeta report on the New Madrid adjustment, which great animations of how the sequence goes, or 7 steps to a safe location. A lot of other things that are on the YouTube channel for Nancy Leader. The Zeta reports just kind of bang, bang, bang. The one that you were referring to earlier that's your favorite, Nancy, is Vitamins in Nature, right? That's the one?
Yes, indeed. Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. Houseboat Living's on there. Off-grid tools, which you just referred to about the carpenter.
Oh, you have an electrician in your group. Oh, boy, you can have a windmill up from old car parts just like that. I mean, it may take
wash
more
a
than
machine
a day,
motor,
but you can do that.
Done.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
If you can get it done in a day, that'd be great. All right, Nancy, that's all the time we have. So let's get to it. Let's get to the preparedness part before we don't have time left. Thank you so much for joining us again with all your knowledge. And like I said before, we want to check out the zetatalk.com website, poleshift.ning.com, or the YouTube channel for Nancy Leader. This episode will appear the day after we air it. So basically Tuesdays after we air our new episodes, that will be on the YouTube channel as well. It's a little bit easier to follow with the pictures and the images and the graphics. So check that out. Thanks, Nancy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Always good to talk to you. Bye-bye, everybody.